Lufia, or Espolis Denki in Japan, is a series of JRPGs released on various consoles. This video will be talking about the second game in the franchise, Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Lufia 2 was developed by Neverland and published by Taito, and is actually a prequel to the original Lufia. The story's protagonist, Maxim, is a fighter living in the rural town of Elsit and makes his living by killing monsters and selling them to the local tavern. This brings us to your second playable character and team member in the game, Tia. Maxim learns about a prophecy involving a strange comet passing his world's orbit and bringing along with it the four prime evils, aka the Sinistrals. In this prophecy there is one fabled hero that has the ability to carry a special sword capable of defeating the Sinistrals, the Dual Sword. Unwillingly accepting this hero might be him, Maxim sets out to retrieve the sword and defeat the prime evils. It is then that he finds out Tia has been following him and wants to go along with him. It becomes clear fairly early in the game that Tia has a serious love interest for Maxim, but Maxim does not seem intent on returning the sentiment. He and Tia, however, travel together from then on, going from town to town. Each new region they arrive in is dealing with its own set of troubles, undoubtedly caused by the appearance of the comet. After picking up yet another travel companion, a browly blonde-haired man named Guy, the company set forth in their quest. Selan, a powerful mage from a kingdom named Sunlatan, soon completes the party, and after a while starts getting close with Maxim. This time Maxim does feel the same way, and the two characters decide to get married and have one child, named Jeros. Their marital and familial bliss is cut short by the kidnapping of Jeros. After retrieving their only son from a man called Idura, who turns out to be a henchman of the Sinistrals, they set out once again to defeat the prime evils, stating that the world, including their son, would never be safe unless they are victorious in their quest. Another 3 party members are then introduced and help you along the way. The incredibly awesome, extremely powerful and wisecracking Dekar, the jovial yet confused Professor Lexis, and finally the powerful elf mage Artie. Once our hero's party, which now consists of Maxim, Selan, Guy and Artie, retrieves a dual sword, they face the 4 Sinistrals in 4 consecutive battles, set in a floating temple of doom. Though victorious, it soon becomes apparent that the only way to truly save everyone is for you and your wife Selan to sacrifice yourselves and crash the temple into the ocean. As a conclusion to the game, we see what we can only assume are our 2 heroes as dead spirits, flying over the world they just rescued, and the people they just saved. As in most decent RPGs, story plays an important role in Lufia. Not only to keep the game moving in a certain direction, but also as a means to keep the player interested. You feel personally involved with each of the characters, and after a while start personifying with Maxim. Stuck in an eternal debate whether or not you truly are the hero of the prophecy, and if you can even live up to the expectations if you were. A good example of getting emotionally invested in a character is Dekar. As a child, this was my all-time favorite character. About midway into the game we are introduced to this spiky blue-haired knight-like persona. In a situation where he is unexpectedly faced with a significant threat in the form of several monsters, he handles them quickly and powerfully, but maybe most importantly, with flair. His quick rebuttals of the classic bad guy monologue give you the feeling he's in control, and as long as Dekar is around, things will be taken care of. Though mostly portrayed by his surroundings as slightly dim-witted and wholly impulsive, Dekar soon shows his big heart and kind-spirited nature, comforting Tia, being eternally loyal and dedicated to his prince, and many other small acts of kindness. Having Dekar in your team was awesome. But what made this character even more awesome is that his time with your party was short-lived, quite literally. He's killed off in a heroic feat of self-sacrifice not too long after joining your party. Understandably, your party is distraught with grief over the loss of a character that in a very short time has become very familiar. And here's the beautiful part in all this. So are you. Deckard dying and going out by saying how puny and weak the monsters were that would eventually cause his downfall is one of those defining moments in my video game life. Things you like and have some form of connection with can die and disappear very sudden. Despite feeling sad for a loss, you have to keep going. And Lufia did a great job at integrating this fundamental fact of life into its game. While both being released on the Super Nintendo, Lufia 2 is actually a big step up from Lufia 1. Lufia 1 actually starts where Lufia 2 ends, in the final battle that we just covered in the previous section. By comparing the two scenes side by side, a big improvement in graphics in the second game is immediately apparent. Character sprites are more fleshed out, and a less intense color scheme makes for a more visually soothing experience. The use of parallax scrolling in some areas is a nice touch that helps bring your environment to life, while also adding an extra layer of player immersion. The world map gives you the feeling of a very open world, which it eventually becomes, while being relatively linear in design at the start of the game. The use of the airship rescales the world below to give the player a feeling of being higher up, and the submarine allows you to explore a simple looking yet very moody underwater world. New terrain gives way to a lot of new enemies to fight. In fact, Lufia 2 has some of the biggest diversity in creatures and bosses sprites I've seen in any RPG. This is a good thing, since especially the random battles can get real old real fast. Something else that sometimes helps break the arduous monotony of some battles is the really awesome animations of the spells and the abilities. They are incredibly polished and range in variety, making them very visually appealing. In contrast to the big number of diverse sprites, towns, castles and some dungeons aren't as impressive in the same way. After a while you're confronted with a lot of returning themes and chipsets. Castles especially often look a lot alike and only differ slightly in number and placement of rooms. While to me visually appealing and sometimes even borderline impressive as far as animations and effects go, Lufia 2 falls in the all too familiar trap of some RPGs of recycling a certain theme throughout the game. Lufia 2 plays a lot like traditional JRPGs. Traveling is done on a world map and is pretty linear. Some backtracking can be done later on in the game, but this is seldomly tedious since the reward is always worthwhile. Where Lufia 2 differs from other classic JRPGs is that it lays a heavy focus on action-based tools and puzzle solving. Tools available to the character vary from a simple sword for cutting bushes, to flaming arrows, bombs and even the hookshot. In this way, Lufia 2 is reminiscent of the classic Zelda: A Link to the Past. It manages to combine two essential yet very different aspects of RPGs, namely real-time action and turn-based battles. Another prime example of this are the vast amounts of puzzles. These differ greatly in style and mechanics and ramp up in difficulty towards the end. Enemy encounters are random and quite frequent when traveling the world map. However, in dungeons, you initiate battles by touching enemy characters. These characters only move when you do, which adds a nice aspect of strategy to avoiding battles. The battle system itself builds on the mechanics of the original game, and in my opinion, makes them better. For example, you now have the ability to target any number of allies or enemies with certain spells. This means that you might want to use an offensive ice spell on a couple enemies, but hold off using on another because that creature might be resistant to it. Your characters also automatically hit the next enemy in line if your original target has died. This wasn't the case in Lufia 1. Apart from that, you have your standard HP and MP, along with an IP bar that builds up each time your character receives damage. Instead of learning skills and spells by growing your character, you either buy them in a spell shop or learn them through equipping a special item. This adds an extra level of customization and more depth to the fights. Different enemies are vulnerable to different spells and abilities. making strategy mandatory in some cases. Another mechanic Lufia 2 introduced to the franchise is the capsule monster system. Several different helpers can be found throughout the game. These essentially work as an extra uncontrollable ally, a lot like Pokemon. These creatures can gain levels by fighting, learn new abilities that way, and can evolve into stronger versions of themselves. Unlike Pokemon, however, evolving these creatures can only be done by feeding them items. This is a clever distinction. By doing this, the game developers gave our old, no longer useful items an extra use in the game. A lot of the mechanics and visual aspects of Lufia 2 might remind you somewhat of Zelda. While certain parallels between the games are undeniable, like the top-down perspective, use of tools and puzzle solving, Lufia 2 tries to combine these classic RPG elements with its own thing, adding turn-based battles, a greater narrative, as well as a greater character optimization. If I had to choose one aspect of Lufia 2 that stood out most to me, I would probably have to go with the amazing soundtrack, with storyline as a close second. Composed by Yasunori Shiono, Lufia 2, to me, has one of the best scores on the entire SNES library. Chill, atmospheric tracks, combined with adventurous tunes when necessary, coming to a crescendo with deep, mysterious music when the storyline reaches a crucial moment. I really don't think there's a lot more to say about the game's music, so I think the best way for me to show you what I'm talking about is to present you with some of my personal favorite music from the game. Lufia 2 offers two completely new game modes upon completing the game, one of which is even worth the effort. After finishing the game once, you are presented with a retry option at the main menu screen. Choosing this will allow you to play the game once more, but now at 4 times the amount of experience and gold gained. While this completion bonus in itself isn't really worth your time, the one you unlock after completing the game once again is well worth it. The ancient cave, which is available in the main storyline, is presented to you as a separate game mode after completing the game 2 times. In contrast to the one found in the main story mode, here you can put together your personal A-team from all available party members and capsule monsters, and you have no access to anything but the ancient cave in the nearby town. This mode of the game is arguably the best thing about Lufia 2 as a whole in terms of replayability. Each of 100 floors of the ancient cave is completely randomized each time and contains several amounts of treasure chests with random items in them. The deeper you venture into the cave, the harder the monsters become. For a slightly more in-depth look at the ancient cave, you can go watch our Ancient Cave VS series, in which Obvious and myself tried to raise our way through. Another small point I wanted to make about Lufia 2 is the out-of-game art style. Throwing away my Lufia 2 box and messing up the game's manual as a child is one of my biggest gaming regrets yet. It had some of the most amazingly deep and beautiful art and lore I have ever come across bundled with the game. Each character and every aspect of the Lufia world was well represented, as well as a complete walkthrough of the game, along with maps and detailed explanations. In 2010, Neverland and Square Enix joined hands in creating a remake of Lufia 2, called Curse of the Sinistrals. This game shifted to an action RPG style, and has not been received very well. But that's a story for another time. Although commanding quite a steep price nowadays, Lufia 2 is in my opinion one of the most underrated SNES titles out there. It touches on all the RPG's sweet spots, and its easygoing yet still enticing gameplay leaves you wanting for more.